In this video, I'm going to show how to set up a character to do some lip sync to some audio in Autodesk Maya. So one thing that I want to show about this, or one thing to kind of bring up about this, is the first stage of lip sync, or the way that I have set up lip sync and the way I've been taught and learned, is to set up the audio so you have something to animate to. But don't do the lip sync right away. Work on the character performance first and then add the lip sync. Actually, then go through and set up the mouse shapes. And I have an interesting technique that I learned to set up some mouse shapes. So I'm going to do that in the second part of this video. But in the very first part of this, I'm just going to set up the character and roughly do a little bit of animation to set up the kind of the character performance. And I'm going to do this by referencing a character first. So first thing I'm going to show is that I've already set up a project. I set up projects for everything because it organizes your folder structure the way that it should be kind of set up for this. Now, different workflows, different studios have different workflows and sort of have different folders, but I'm just using the default one that Maya sets up. So I've already set up a project. And in that project, I've already set up a couple character files and I play some audio. So the audio went into the sounds directory and any rig files that I'm going to use for characters went into the scenes directory. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to reference in the character, right? And I use character references that way I'm not working on the actual rig file, right? I'm referencing in that rig file. So I'm going to create a reference and I'm going to use this character called Alex. And by the way, if you ever see something like this from older rigs, it just means that it's using these Mentalray Nodes, which is a renderer that used to be shipped with Maya, but no longer is. Arnold is now the one that is shipped. NVIDIA purchased Mentalray, and they no longer support the renderer. So I believe you could still download it, or perhaps not, but you could just click OK. It really doesn't matter at this point in time. At some point in time, it would be nice to go back through and look at characters and make sure that they have, sort of all the nodes that were Mentalray nodes have been replaced, but you could just click OK. It's not going to really hurt it at all. So when I bring this character in, this specific character has the joints and everything showing, but what I usually do for my animation, when I'm going to do animation, is I go to show and I go to none and I show just the polygons. And then I show NURB surfaces and NURBS curves. So sometimes people make some NURB, kind of eyes or different, shapes out of NURBS. But we need to have the control curves to be able to kind of manipulate and move the character, right? So I have one character that's plugged in. It's referenced in my scene. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reference in, deselect. I need to be kind of not selected on anything. And I'm going to right click and then go to reference and create another reference and use the same rig file. So I'm going to set it in there as like a character number 2, and I can, kind of configure it, make it look a little bit different. So that way, I have 2 characters that are somewhat similar and can be animated separately. So I just select the placement controller for one. I just selected it once. I didn't drag across it. I just kind of clicked on it and it'll grab one of them and then I can move it around, right? And then I can reposition it. And so usually when I'm doing this, I try to set up, a very specific camera to get this character into view. So I'm going to move it over here and then I'm going to go to create and cameras and camera, and I'm going to set up what's called a shot camera. So if I could select the camera and go to the attribute editor, and I'm going to call that shot camera. Right. And then I'm going to bring that up and bring it out. Right. And I can turn on show cameras, right? So I can see where that camera is and I can kind of rotate it. And then what I'll end up doing is I can split the view and then make one of these, that's perspective. So I'm going to make this one the shot camera, right? And then I can kind of position that camera. I can turn on the resolution gate, which is going to really, the resolution gate shows me what would eventually render. So I can kind of work with that camera and make sure. A couple things about setting up shots, just real quickly, is right now it doesn't look like that character is really talking to anybody because I don't have anybody else in the scene. So quite often you'll see in movies where you do like what's called an over-the-shoulder shot, or kind of shows this other character in the scene, right? So it looks like he's talking to somebody, right? Not just, so we do this kind of little over-the-shoulder shot, right? Right? Or I can kind of bring it up a little bit and bring it in. I can also change, I can go to this camera and I can change the angle of view. So I can kind of widen it out just a little bit if I want to, right? And then I can, that way I can bring the camera in closer or get it, closer to this character, and then rotate it around. Just to kind of get a good angle on this, on one of the characters where, he's, looks like he's engaging and talking to somebody, right? So I can kind of set it up that way, right? And again, I can go show, go to none, go to polygon. So if this is my shot camera, I can, show all the animation curves in this one, but I don't have to show them in my shot view. That's kind of one of the bonuses of this, is setting up this shot camera so I can make it, give it a little bit of a different look, right? Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And I already started, a couple of these, but I'm going to call this 7A, right? Click OK. And then a couple things about, animation in general. I can set up my own specific, workspace views. So right now it's Maya Classic. I can switch to this animation view. And I kind of embellish upon this animation view a little bit, right? So right now it shows sort of the perspective view of these two characters, right? But if I want to show the shot camera, right, and it shows the animation curves down below. So, but I can go to panels and then go to layouts and go 2 panes side by side, right? Or this is going to be 2 panes, split top, or but right now, it's not dealing with this over here, which is kind of cool. So if I go to layouts and 2 panes side by side, then I'm going to have my, this one view here, which is my shot camera, and I can go through and turn off the HUD. And that way it doesn't, I can, have a pretty clean look. But if I do that, you'll notice that when I do that, the gate mask goes away. So I can kind of clean that up if I wanted to, but it's not that big of a deal for animation. It depends on what you want to have shown up here, right? But this will get me, to kind of see what my camera shot's going to look like, right? And I can kind of bring that down so I can kind of manipulate the characters over here, right? So then I can actually save whatever view I have. I can actually save that as a different workspace. I can go down and save current workspace as, right? So I can kind of customize that. One thing that I notice on this is the help doesn't show down here. So I can actually go to Windows and then go to UI elements and then turn on the help line if I want it, right? And then it shows up back here. So when I hover over things, if you really need that back, just to kind of show you that, right? Okay, so the next thing I need to do is I'm going to bring in the audio. Right, and so because I need something to animate too, and I'm going to use the audio from what's called the 11-Second Club, and it's a website where they sponsor a contest, a monthly animation contest. So I'm going to grab some of the audio from there that you can download and use. So I'm going to go to import, and I don't need to go to the option box, just to import, and I'm going to go down to sounds because I put that in the sound directory. That's where you'd want to put that, and then I'm going to go ahead and import. It's going to reload the scene, so might see this error again if you had this error show up originally. But then that it puts the audio down into the timeline. Right. One thing about the audio, this is an 11-second club, so the audio clips are usually about 11 seconds long. So I've already kind of set my timeline for that duration, and you can kind of set it for a little bit longer just to kind of see, if that is accurate. Right. So there you have. It goes to about 265. So I'm going to set that to 265, and I'm going to set that, right? So it automatically sets the time slider. So that's the entire duration of my audio. And you can already hear that I can scrub through and hear that audio. Or you can play it.
Me? Those days are long behind me. I don't think I've held a balloon since I was a child.
Then you've forgotten what it's like.
To hold a balloon?
Right, so that's the audio for this current this last competition. Now, if you end up doing this, you probably will see a different audio. If you download the audio from the 11-Second Club, you'll probably have a different audio. But this is the one that was available when I was doing this demo. So just kind of present that. So what I end up doing first is I go through and I really set up my character in terms of kind of what's going to go on with the performance, right? So I might set my initial kind of where the arms are initially. Right, so the character doesn't look kind of all messed up, and he's got FK arms right now. So I'm going to move move these hands a little bit. So to kind of just position it. I'm not going to worry about the body at first. I'm going to kind of worry about kind of what's going on with the head and sort of position that. But I'm not going to worry about any of the lip movements. I might worry about, like I might move the jaw a little bit if I want to, but I'm going to set this up so I have, a lot of keys, at first. So I could select across the entire characters or all of them, and then just press S on the keyboard. So I know I have an initial key on every single, anything that's animatable, right? So, and then I'm going to go and select just sort of the jaw, and I'm going to look at what's being said. Now, in reality, what I'd end up doing is I'd record or I shoot video of myself sort of acting this out, miming out these scenes to really get kind of how I would perform it, right? And then I would roughly animate to that reference. So I'm going to kind of forego that step and see how I can get a good performance out of just sort of reacting to what's being said in the audio, right? So I'm going to play this a little bit.
Me? Those days are long behind me.
Right. So I'm going to start with that. Me. Right. And so I just start by kind of positioning. I'm going to go to about frame 10, and I'm going to do a little bit of a movement in the head a little bit. Right. And I'm going to set sort of some very basic default sort of movements here. W. Right. And one thing about eyebrows is they do a lot of this. They go this way quite often, right? So one thing to kind of think about when you're sort of setting these things up is when you sort of make expressions, you kind of want to change up the eyebrows a little bit to kind of get them to kind of move in a little bit maybe, right? Kind of move that way and then move them in and out, as well as, they move when they blink. And I'll talk about blinks in a little bit, and I'm just kind of pressing S, and I'm probably going to duplicate some of these or, modify it from that because I just really had a default thing, right? And I'm going to move this a little bit. So these eye look controls can kind of do this a little bit, right? And then I'm going to, right? So I'm going to set up some default poses, and I can move this if I want, right? Press S on the keyboard. Right, I'm going to get a little bit of movement. And I didn't key that. So I'm actually going to start where, I don't want him to start where he's this sort of default position. I want him to kind of move around a little bit. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get him to kind of look at this character. I look at this other character. Oops. Press S on the keyboard. So I'm going to middle mouse and drag over to about frame 10. Press S on the keyboard just so I have that kind of keyed in the same spot, right? So I can kind of get a little bit of motion going on, but a couple tips that I'll bring up about doing a lot of lip sync and a lot of kind of head movements is I do a lot of what's called moving holds, and I'll get into kind of how I do that and how I approach that, right? But then I'm going to go over here. I want him to kind of, he says, me.
Me? Those days are long.
Right, those days. And so I'm going to have him kind of shift his eyes over and look at this other character. But I'm going to start from this point. I'm going to select those eye controls, right? And I can select them both at the same time and sort of rotate them over. So he's looking at this character over here. Press S on the keyboard. And I'm going to middle mouse and drag that back just so it's kind of holding in that position. And then I'm going to have him sort of, I'm going to have him kind of look down a little bit. Press S, and then have him look over to this character again. But shift his eyes around, right? Now, a couple things about eyes when you're moving eyes is they dart around. They don't do a lot of swimming. Your eyes don't kind of swim around. They might sort of follow something. If something's moving sort of fast in front of you, you're kind of turning your head and you're following with your eyes. But eyes rather dart around. And if you look a lot of, references for, live action animation, you'll see the eyes dart around. Like they go to a place, they hold, they go to a place, they hold, and that sort of thing. Right. So I'm going to kind of set it up where this character is sort of doing that. Right. So I'm going to have him blink right here because usually eye blinks occur in between sort of these phrases, like when a character is thinking about it, right? And this one, it's specific, me, he says, he's thinking about it.
Those days
are long behind me, right? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to have him blink. And here's how I set up blanks. And so I'm kind of really just starting in on sort of getting him to do a lot of emotion and kind of show a lot of emotion for this. So I'm going to select these two. Oh, that one, that one. I'm going to press S on the keyboard. And I'm going to press W to move. And I'm going to move them down. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to select these because I want these to be keyed as well. Press S on the keyboard. And I'm going to move 2 frames. Right? And I'm going to pull it up. Right? I'm going to press S, select these. Right? I'd already keyed all 4 of them. I'm going to close them down. Press S on the keyboard. And then I can move, a couple more frames down, open them up. S on the keyboard. And then on the same frame, select these, move them down. Press S on the keyboard. And actually, since he's kind of looking down at that point, I'm going to kind of do this. S on the keyboard, right? And you're going to notice he blinks and he darts his eyes, right? And I don't want them necessarily swimming around. So I'm going to look at sort of those eye look controllers. Like I said, they shouldn't be swimming around too much. They should be darting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to middle mouse and drag. Let me bring this timeline. So I'm going to focus just on this area really quick. Right, so that's where the eyes sort of, they go from here to here. And that's a pretty good dart, but I'm going to hold this one for just a couple frames. And I'm going to press S on the keyboard, middle mouse and drag, right? Oop. I'm going to back up because I'm going to hold this position. So I'm going to do that. See that? When he blinks and he looks down, right? That's kind of my idea. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to accentuate that. I'm going to select so I already set keys here, but I'm going to go to where I have the character blinking, and I'm going to pull all these down. I'm going to press S on the keyboard, really accentuate the eye blink, and then pull these down. Press S on the keyboard, right? Go back to where they open, do that. Select those for the eyebrows, and I kind of bring them up a little bit. And I could even, bring them over, bring them back a little bit. Whoop. Bring them back, bring them down. Press S, select these. Right, bring it up a little bit, bring it out a little bit. S on the keyboard, and now I should have, right? So the other thing I want to do is I want to kind of have him move his head a little bit. So I've got that one here, and that's kind of being held. And I'm going to go to about here, and I'm going to have him kind of rotate his head a little bit. Come this way. So he's going to be kind of like looking over at this character, this other character over here, S. Right? But now, the other thing about doing sort of character emotions is you tend to make sort of rather these kind of quick movements, but you don't end up just drifting from spot to spot. So we do a lot of what's called moving holds. So I'm going to middle mouse and drag this over to here. All right, and so you're going to see that he kind of holds for here, and then he moves really quick, and then holds, right? And I don't necessarily like that pose, so I'm going to bring it up a little bit. So he's looking down, and then I kind of want him to look in here, and then let me bring it up a little bit. S, middle mouse and drag to hold that. And then about here, I'm going to have him kind of look up again a little bit and kind of rotate his head this way. Look this way maybe, right? Get him to look like that, S, right? And I don't particularly care for where his eyes have darted. So I'm going to go here and select these and then kind of move his eyes back a little bit. Press S on the keyboard and middle mouse and drag because that's where he should be darting it from, right? Good, cool. All right, so, and I'm going to look at these keys right here, and specifically I'm going to kind of isolate one of the channels where he's moving. Oops, sorry, it's all rotation. All right, and I'm going to have you guys, you're all going to kind of look at where he is moving. So this is where he's moving, this is where he's holding. But if you look, when he's holding, it's kind of dead. Like he's got some eye movement there or whatever. but like he's not moving at all. And we want to do what's called add a moving hold. So if I select these two keys, you notice the neck is not moving at all, but the bodies don't necessarily do that. They move a little bit, so they don't just kind of stand still. So I'm going to take these two keys, I'm select across these two keys, and you see the handles show up in between them. So I'm going to select the two handles, and I'm going to middle mouse them and drag them up, right? So you're going to see it sort of rounding out that shape. The most change is from here to here, but this is going to, kind of add a little bit of movement in there. So again, the same thing here. I'm going to grab across those two handles, middle mouse and drag, so that it's sort of flowing from, up and down into that movement, right? The same thing here. I'm going to select the rotate Y. I'm going to grab these, grab those handles, middle mouse and drag them up a little bit. Same thing here, grab these handles, move them down a little bit. All right, so it's flowing through that key and up here. I don't want to grab them and drag them the other way. It would look really awkward because then they'd be going kind of opposite, right? So I'm bringing them down to make the curve continue and then come back up through that other key, right? And if I've got something here, I'm going to do the same thing. Grab those, middle mouse. And here you have to have you've got a decision to make, right? Because he's stopping and then he's kind of going here. So I'm going to get him to a point, he's going to back the other direction. So this is sort of rotation. So that's what he's going to do. And if you need to go through and move some of these, like that doesn't seem to make sense, you can kind of move it down a little bit. And, he's going to do a little bit of a hold there and then continue that motion. So that might actually look a little bit better, right? So I'm going to play this through.
Me? Those days are long behind me.
Right. So me. So you have to kind of interpret what, how this character would move. And again, you would usually base this on my own reference of, something I would act it out and do this, but I'm kind of pretending what this character might, do during this dialogue.
Me? Those days are long behind.
Right. So I don't want it to swim around too much. And I feel like I'm kind of getting that idea. So I'm going to take these two keys and actually I'm going to select across everything that I can kind of see in the view. And I'm going to select across all this and I'm going to move it down, grab it in the middle, move it down a little bit, right? And see.
Me? Those days are long behind.
Right. And I still feel like he's kind of swimming around too much. His movements are, this probably needs to be a little bit closer because I've got some movement going on here. So I'm going to look at that spot and see what's going on here. Right. So, yeah. So this is where I've got kind of that movement and I might have too much going on right here. So I want to bring that down just a little bit. Right. But this to here, it's like it's just swimming around a little bit. So I want to bring this a little bit closer. So I'm going to select that key, bring it down to about right here. And then I can middle mouse and drag that to say over here and then press S on the keyboard for that key. And again, go through and look at the rotations for that. Right. Sorry. And, let me press Q on the keyboard. So usually I can, there we go. Sorry. And then I could grab those two handles and kind of drag them down a little bit to get a little bit of, now he's kind of popping into place. You can kind of see that he's not just drifting from place to place. It looks,
those days are long behind.
Right. And then he might do a little bit more action somewhere in here or something, right? Right, and I can maybe I can key him there and then get him to move sort of a little bit over here, as he's kind of talking. Whoop. Do that. Press S on the keyboard and then middle mouse and drag that over to here, right? So I'm making very kind of quick movements. Right. And then it's holding, quick and then hold, quick and then hold. That's kind of the idea behind this, to make it look fairly realistic in terms of what kind of characters would normally do, right? So
behind me, me. Those days are long behind me, me.
Right. And so I'm going to continue to add, movement and emotion, and I can actually bring. So I'm going to select sort of his nose here. And then I'm going to bring that up a little bit. So I don't have to worry about too much of the facial animation, right? But I want to kind of give an idea of what the body or the really focus on the eyes and sort of the position of the head and how to sort of pantomime out the actions or the dialogue of the character, right? So I'm going to select all these and go to here and press S on the keyboard. Go here. I'm going to bring them down a little bit. Right. I'm going to add another blank. I'm going to add a blank right in there right before he starts talking again. Right. Again, select these two, and I'll select these two. Press S on the keyboard so they're all kind of where they would start blinking. And actually, I'm going to have him blink about right here. So I'm going to press S on the keyboard, 1, 2, and then I'm going to bring these top ones down. So I set a key at the start and the end of that. Press S on the keyboard. Select these, and I'm going to hit F on the keyboard to get really close. Select these, move them up, get them to kind of close. And I like to, kind of keep them closed for, sometimes you can kind of keep them closed for a couple frames. Don't go too long, because maybe even 1 frame. So it gives them a little bit more time to process that. Right. And then what I end up doing is I kind of add an eye blink in there, or an eye movement. Right. So I'm pressing S on the keyboard right there. And then I'm going to make it dart from here to here. So I'm going to press, so I'm kind of doing the, press S on the keyboard. And then I'm going to use those. I'm going to hold for a couple frames. And then I'm going to dart down after a couple frames. Right? Right. And then I'm going to accentuate that blink by selecting these. Again, I'll reiterate that usually what I end up doing, whoops, I'm going to key that anyway. I'm going to select this and middle mouse it and drag over to here. Right. Now, right here he says, he laughs. So I'm going to bring these in a little bit and press S on the keyboard. And then I'm going to bring it out a little bit. S on the keyboard. Same thing over here. Select these. I'm going to go back a couple frames. Actually, I'm going to middle mouse and drag that to here. And then bring him down. S. And then when he opens them, I'll bring him out a little bit. Whoop. Press S. Right. Let's see if I can coordinate all these. So I have them moving in slightly different timings and everything. So, yeah. Yep. I don't particularly care for the timing. So what I'll do is I'll select everything that wound up over here. I'm going to middle mouse and drag over here. Whoop. Hold down Shift and it'll constrain it. Everything here. So I have that moving. I'm going to select all these, kind of move them over to have them. All right, so I'm going to get, let me get this one. I'm going to middle mouse and drag it over to here. I want to hold that. Change my course of action a little bit. Because I don't like, bring that one down. Whoop. Q on the keyboard. I just kind of reset it a little bit. Press W, I'm going to go down a little bit. Press S on the keyboard. Right. And now let's see. I want to get that one. And I'll hold that one a little bit. And then select these. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to grab that one. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. Okay. There we go. So I have it darting around a little bit. But I don't like where this one's winding up. So I'm going to grab these. Let's see. That one winds up at frame 28. So I'm going to grab these. I'm going to bring these over to frame 28. That one, I'm just going to duplicate it. There we go. Right. And then I'm going to bring these down a little bit. Bring them in. Press S, and then I'm going to grab these, do the same thing. So bring them up a little bit, bring them over, press S. Right, so now I've got... So now let's look at what he's doing over here.
Me? Those days are long behind me.
Right?
Me? Those days are long behind me. Me? Those days are long behind me.
Right, and I still have a lot more to go. I mean, I still feel like I need to have a little bit more movement in here at some points in time. You know, I haven't gone the entire length of that dialogue, but that kind of starts out the process of, before I do any lip sync, I'm getting, you know, the character to sort of move and go with what's going on in the dialogue. All right. So again,
those days are long behind me.
Right. And I probably don't want to add too much more in this spot. I might want to just kind of clean up the keys a little bit, especially in terms of the movement. I don't need it to be moving around too much. Right. And I don't need to add any, you know, probably any more eye blinks, maybe another one towards the end of this. But I do want to get him to kind of, you know, sort of move back a little bit so I can actually grab grab his neck control, and I'll move it back just a little bit. So I'm going to get it to here. And I'll actually middle mouse and drag that over to here. Press S on the keyboard, middle mouse and drag over to here. Actually, I'm going to just move it back a little bit, press S. Middle mouse and drag over to here, press S. I'm going to do another little quick movement. Press S, right? And actually, this is probably a little bit too far. Okay, so I'm going to bring that over there, press S, right? And then I can look at the keyframes, move my mouse over here and press F on the keyboard. And then I can grab these, and these I just sort of added, but I'm gonna take those out. But I can just, that one's the one I want to take out. So I'm gonna just cut that out. And then grab these, again, do that trick where I grab both of the handles, middle mouse and drag them down just a little bit to get a little bit of movement. Right, and then that's rotate Y. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Select those handles, move them up a little bit. Just get a little bit of movement going on, sort of in the upper body too. So I could actually then, you know, shift this as well, because I don't need to go down too far, but I do want to kind of show a little bit more motion and a little bit more movement in the rest of the body. You know, other than, you know, this is all I'm going to show in this shot, so I don't need to animate below that. But so I'm going to middle mouse and drag that over here. Right, go over to here. Actually, I'm going to go to frame 14. It's probably about the same timing as I did everything else. Move it like this a little bit. Press S on the keyboard. Middle mouse and drag that over to, say, about here. And then, you know, every time I move it, I'm going to press S on the keyboard and sort of, you know, get him to move around a little bit. Oh, I'm going to middle mouse and drag that over to here, press S, and I actually ended up moving him a little bit too much, so I duplicated that one. And then I'll look at these keys. And again, just go to each one of the rotations. Again, if I did something like that, I could actually just move this up, get a little bit of movement going on in here. But this to this, I could just grab these handles, middle mouse, pull them down a little bit, just get a little bit of motion going on, so he's not just completely still, but if you add too much, it looks like he's just kind of swimming around, right? Which is not what we want. That's not what people do. They kind of dart around a little bit. They kind of stay in one position, move really quickly, and sort of jump from spot to spot, right? It's going to look really kind of weird if they're just sort of slowly moving from one spot to the next, right? So add that there. I go down, should have it all. Right, and then I'll look at the whole thing.
Those days are long behind me.
Yep. See, now I get a little bit more
Those days are long behind me.
But he kind of pops from place to place instead of just sort of drifting around all the time. Stops, moves and stops. And I still feel like there's a little bit, like I've got a little bit too much swimming going on in the neck. So I can kind of look at each one of those. Like I don't like what's going on here. So, he moves there, but then I'm going to move him. I can move this down, right? And just get, all I really need is that to kind of hold in place for a little bit. And then I can also offset those to get a better look out of them, right? I'm just going to bring that up. Grab these, right? Sort of, roughing it out a little bit. Get that to come back about there. And then let's see. This might be better.
Me? Those days are long behind me. Me?
Right. A little bit of a mechanical movement towards the end right here. And so what I could do is, take out one of those, or I could offset these, right? I can actually take these keys and move them over a little bit. So I'm going to hold down Shift and kind of move them this way. Right. So he's not like, doing them at the same sort of robotic movement or something, right? Bring this over a little bit. There we go.
Those days are long behind me. Me? Those days are long behind me.
All right, so anytime I can kind of offset some keys, and typically I kind of want to pay attention to sort of the direction it's going. So I can, and then what I can do is add a little bit of anticipation to it, right? So if he's just doing this and he goes back, right? I've already kind of built anticipation in this. He goes one direction and then goes back the other direction. And then he sort of drifts, and then he kind of goes back. And so what I could do, this is already building in, adding this is building in a little bit of anticipation for that. And I think this is going a little bit too far, so I'm going to bring that back down. And this might be going a little too far, so bring that back down. All right, I don't want to make it look robotic, so, I don't necessarily need to show
those days are long behind.
Precise movements, and maybe I've got a little bit too much motion going on here, but I want to add a little bit of motion, and so it's not so robotic, right? But he does dart around, right? So let's kind of get go through the entire thing and set up the character poses. You can also, one kind of cool thing that Autodesk Maya has in it is you can do this. The enable stepped preview. You can't see it on my screen right now, but if I right click, you can go to enable stepped preview. And what that will do is when you turn it on, it's going to pop from
Those
place
days are
to
long
place.
behind me.
Should just get an idea of the poses. So what you could do is go through and like set, I want this pose here. I go down a few more frames to each kind of area where he's presenting the dialogue or he's talking. You can then set a pose and then kind of right click and turn off the enable. You'll see it there's a little check mark next to enable step preview. So yeah, it's kind of the basis of it. I think, yeah, there it is. You could see it here under playback. You could say enable stepped preview, and when you turn that
long
on,
behind me. Me?
he pops from place
Those
to
days
place.
are long behind me.
Right, so it goes to each key and he holds it, and you kind of see when that happens, it doesn't seem so. It seems a little bit more robotic, but you don't see the kind of gradual changes. You see it pop, but it gives you a better idea of each pose and kind of how to set up each pose. Right, so when you turn that off, he's going to be sort of drifting from place to place.
Those days are long behind me. Me?
Right. So that's the idea. You kind of go through the entire audio and sort of set these poses and kind of get the character to sort of express the emotion of what's going on. And one thing you want to do is kind of look at what emotion he starts the dialogue with and kind of what emotion he wants to end that with and kind of the transition between those sort of emotions and try to express that emotion in the character's face and how it's doing before you even start worrying about the dialogue. So that'll kind of get you going, and I'll present another video where I talk about lip sync and actually setting up the face shapes and how to kind of use a little library to use those face shapes to just add them to the character. So you don't have to continue to make new face shapes. You can always just go back to sort of this library of face shapes. So I'll show that in the next video. Have fun with this and enjoy.